Welcome to When We Talk Podcast, a place where we talk about everything from relationships, marriage, being single, conflict in marriages, conflict in relationships. We talk about it all. This episode is hosted by Kenneth Bonner, Reggie Smith, and Jacqueline Wells. Well, welcome again to When We Talk. I am your host, Kenneth Bonner.
And this is Reggie Smith.
We have a new host joining us on the show, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hey, everybody. It's Jacqueline Wells, better known as Jackie D.
Welcome back, Jackie. So we had her on a show where we talked about Okay with Being Number Two, the second parts of that. You can go check that out now. But she had some keen insight as it relates to that topic. So what we're going to do today is let her go ahead and start today's show off.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about the importance of fatherhood. We all know that it's so important to have men involved in the lives of our kids. So one of the things that I want to start off is a question to you guys. What are some of the things that you learned from your father that helped shape you into being a good father today?
Okay, so I guess I'll go first. Reggie's looking at me like, you can go first. All right. So for me, I learned a lot from my dad. One of the things I learned from my dad was the independence that I have. And I feel that the independence that he taught me kept me from depending on people to do everything for me. And because he taught me how to be independent, it gave me the drive to go out and do things on my own, to pursue things that I wanted to do, to create things that I wanted to create, to go after anything that I felt like I wanted to accomplish or do in my life. That's one of the biggest things he taught me. The other thing that I got from my dad is the last 2 years of his life, I was living out in Texas, and I heard that, got a call that he was sick. And so I made the decision to move back out to Indiana. And so at that time, he had a recording studio. So with him, his health was fading. He passed away from pancreatic cancer. They gave him 6 months to live, but he really actually lived 2 years after that. Fortunately, he was saved before he even knew he got sick, so I had peace in that. But the time that I spent with him going back and forth to the studio, learning the tricks and trades on the back end of the editing, the mixing, the engineering portion of the audio, it kind of helped me out to where I was helping out with sound system in church. Even now with the podcast, the little background that we do, I got a lot of those skills from my dad and my uncles, and so I felt like, although those are the latter years, it helped me become who I am. And I also got some of my identity from him because my dad was a man that was driven and he had goals and, his success factor that I'm going to create a studio. I'm trying to build something for my family. He was a musician. Him and his brothers had bands, and so I think I got a lot of that drive from my dad.
Great.
Right. From my standpoint, I got a number of things as watching my dad be a man. We came up in a time where men were men. I learned from my dad to say what you mean and mean what you say. Be a man of your word. I learned from my dad strength and fortitude and hard work and the value of hard work. Even right up to my dad passing, he was working up until he just got too sick to work, but he was always working. I also learned the value of family and protection. I didn't know what it was to cover a wife and protect a woman. And watching my dad do that has made me who I am today. The way he covered my mother and protected her from even things that she was not even aware of. I learned those things from him. And I learned how to put your wife first and to have your needs come last as it pertains to your family and raising your kids. But our dads back in the day, 70s and beyond, they were real men. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. They walked the walk. Yeah. They talked the talk. They meant what they said. And I learned that. And even to this day, and me and Kenneth have talked about it, when I've had those stagnation aspects of not being employed or not finding work, it just agitated me because not being able to work was just something that just wasn't heard mm-hmm. of. You did something to bring something to the table. Or you made it happen no matter what. So right. I learned those values of my dad. And even during that time, me and Kenneth was talking, I'm just like, man, I need to do something. Because I always saw my dad doing something. I never saw my dad sitting around just chilling, not doing nothing. He was always doing something to make sure that his family was taken care of, and the wife and the kids would be able to move forward even long after his demise.
Yeah, that provider factor was definitely something that I could say our fathers did, and the protecting aspect. My dad was somebody you didn't want to play with.
No,
and it's just one of those things where I didn't want to play with my dad. I can honestly say that throughout my whole life, I have never gotten a whooping, spanking, beating, whatever you got. I have never caught one of those from my dad. I always dodged a bullet. Now, my mom is something different.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the importance of mom on another segment, but my mom kept me in line. But, my dad, he gave me that talk, like kind of like Reggie said, they meant what they said. You couldn't blow smoke. You couldn't talk around, anything he said. You had to come with the truth because he could see right
Yeah,
through.
and I think everything that you guys touched on is the basis of what the foundation of what fatherhood looks like. Because for me growing up, I can remember my father, setting the expectation that,
Right.
If a man don't work, he don't eat.
Yep.
So everything that I seen, in my father was, he was a provider. He also provided the loving and the caring and the nurturing aspect too, as well, just to let me know that he is there and he is present as being that fatherhead in my life. And so that really helped me understand too, as a little girl, some of the things that I can look for or can expect from a mate or, different relationships that I might find myself coming in contact with just from, seeing how my father exemplified, what leadership looks like, right. His role as being a leader in the home and taking charge over different things. Because my father did it all. He cooked, he cleaned, he worked. He provided strong guidance on, what we were supposed to do, how we were supposed to do it. And he helped us become who we are today.
Right. And one of the things for me, my mom and dad divorced when I was 4, but my dad never stopped being involved in our lives. Even though he worked a lot, he worked in the steel mill, so he was constantly working doubles. And I think your dad worked in the steel mill.
He did.
And so,
mine too.
Yeah, yours too. So that's something else we have in common. But he worked a lot of doubles, and sometimes you feel like you need more time with him, or you didn't understand, like, hey, why can't I get that time that I need? But you have to respect the fact that what they're doing is trying to build something for you. They're trying to pave the way. They're trying to be that provider that you need. Right. And sometimes I feel like men run into roadblocks with being involved in their children's life, which poses my next question to you, Jackie. What do you think are some things that can be roadblocks to a father having a relationship with his child or his children?
Wow, that's a good one. I think from a woman's point, it's situational, because anytime that you have a woman that is keeping their child away from their father, you have to wonder what that reason or what that cause is. Now, when I say situational, it could be something that happened to her early on based off of how she was raised and what she's seen in her own household. And that could be reasons to why she's not wanting that child to be a part of that father's life. And then too, when you think about, the mother, from a mother's perspective, it could be the relationship that she had with that kid's father. How did that relationship turn out? What happened, and what was the aspects around her wanting to prevent that child from being with their dad? Now, bitterness, is one of the things that I can think of that could be a reason why, because things didn't work out between us. I'm going to be vindictive and, hold the child from, you being able to be with them, you being able to see them. Or, it could be the fact that they just don't want the father to be involved at all, period.
Yeah, I don't think that's a justifiable cause, though. Those are definitely some roadblocks. What do you think, Reggie? You think any of those are justified? Well, some of them may be justified, depending on how the father's treating the kid, or if he's there supporting the kid, or however that situation is. I think that there may be some justification behind that, but in a sense, I don't think that a lot of things are justified, whereas you shouldn't just keep a child from being involved, or a father from being involved in their children's life just because you're bitter.
I don't think that too many things are justifiable as to why a woman would keep their child or children away from the father. The only thing that I could think of is maybe safety issues.
Right.
That would be one thing if depending on the type of life he might be living, or maybe he might be in the drug game or doing illegal things or actually taking drugs himself. Now, I can understand that because now that becomes a safety aspect, a safety factor. But I can't find too many other reasons that's justifiable as to why a woman would keep a child away from a father, especially in today's times. The stats are showing that more and more fathers are now wanting to be a part of the child's life. And it's not so much so society that's preventing that from happening. It's more now the women, for whatever reasons there may be, and there are numerous reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I think for a while we were in a period of time where systematically they wanted the men to be out of the household. And that's definitely a whole nother conversation. But, you know, just for yeah, when you get on that level, it's like an intentional thing. And I think that we had that situation going on for a while. But to Reggie's point, when you're raised by men and you're impacted by great men like we are, you have a desire and just that drive to be involved in your children's lives. You know, for me, hands down, I want to be involved in my kid's life. But at the same time, I don't want my relationship to be dictated by somebody I'm not in a current relationship with, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because we see too often where men want to have a relationship with their kids, but the mom is bitter, like you were talking about early. For whatever reason, she's bitter and she wants to become a roadblock or keep the kids from them, or let the kids come around dad when she wants to go on her vacation or wants to do whatever the case. I don't think that that's fair to a man that's actually trying to be involved in his kid's life.
Yeah, and I think that's the dominant factor because I carried the child for 9 months. You know, I was, I played a major part in the development and nurturing of bringing this child up. So I think, too, that that's another, reason why women feel like they have that control factor is because they actually bore the child. Right. Even though, as a man, you can bring a lot of great qualities and you're significant in playing the role as being his father, but I'm his mother. I'm going to be there when he falls and scrape his knee. I'm going to be there to feed him and to make sure that he doesn't go hungry. From a mother's perspective, I'm playing that dominant role in caring for that child. Even though I'm not trying to disregard you as the father, but to me, that's my baby.
Right.
And we get that. I get that, but at the same time, I still feel like there are some women that use kids as pawns or tools just to get back at the father. For whatever reason they had a bad relationship, or he cheated or she cheated or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you're putting that child at a risk. And what I mean by that is everything you do, what you allow to come around that child, what you don't allow to come around that child or children affects how that child grows up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think that sometimes the kids, like you said, become the pawn, meaning that now you throw the kids into this unnecessary chess match. Right. And they're being moved like pawns and kings and queens on there. But a lot of women, when they're in a relationship with this man, a big percentage of the time is that they're angry and bitter because now this man has moved on and you're no longer a part of his plan.
Right.
So now that woman is hurt, she's voided, she's empty, she's angry. And especially if she knows how much you care about that kid.
Yes.
So the only thing that she can use to get back at you
is that kid.
Is the kid. It's not cutting up your car. Yeah, that might bring an issue. It's not talking about your mama. It's not saying all these negative things about you. But they know, because they've seen how you look at that kid. They'd be like, well, if I could keep that kid away, it might bring him back to me. And sadly to say, a lot of men have gone back to that mother because they wanted to have a relationship with that kid. So now you are creating a situation where it's like you're trying to force a piece into a puzzle. He really doesn't want to be there, but he loves that kid so much that he sacrifices. But the back end of that is that the sacrifice becomes too much. So eventually he gets pushed away completely out of the lives of both the mother and that child because it's just too much, because that's not what he wants. And so it creates this the spiral of so many different things that began to happen, not just with the mother, but so much so more with that child and the father. So many entities and so many aspects of negativity is involved in it, and it causes so much detriment.
It does.
So Jackie, with your father being involved in your life, how much did it benefit you in a sense of how you dated, how you chose who you dated, and those types of things? And I know we all go through whatever we go through, and it's a learning process. But how important was that? And I'm asking you this because there's probably a lot of women that may be in some of the positions we talked about, to where you may be a little bit bitter or upset, and you want to keep the kid from their mom, or vice versa. There are some single fathers that may be doing the same thing, and it's not on the level of you feel you have to protect it from a safety point. Can you just elaborate a little bit on how important it is, and how important your father played a role in your life from that perspective?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's important to have a male role model for me to model after on what I'm looking for in growing up. You know, I mean, it built my personal characteristics on what it was and who I am as a woman today. You know, the values and the morals that I have in growing up was, you know, pretty much modeled after who my father was. He taught me how to be honest, you know, integrity, you know, making sure that even as a woman that I work hard too, you know. And so a lot of those values from watching him is what helped develop me into being who I was. And also, you know, some of the do's and don'ts, and, you know, and my ability to be able to choose, you know, the type of guys that I was dating, or, you know, or the type of guys that I wanted to date.
Right. I want to say this in regards to that, is that a lot of men don't even understand. I'm just going to talk about from a little girl standpoint before we jump into the little boys. A lot of men don't even understand is that girl, when she sees that father, he's necessarily her first love.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He is that pillar of strength in what a man should be as she goes into adulthood, as far as what she would want her husband to be or act like or look like. I remember having several conversations with several different friends of mine that were females, and I could not understand why, even now, late 20s, late 30s and 40s, why they were acting the way that they were acting. Or they may have husbands who were good husbands and good providers, and they may have had their flaws. But I can never understand, well, if this man is so good, why do you still feel this way about this person? Or why is it so hard for you to make that connection and move on? So one particular day I decided to ask the question. I'm like, was your father in your life? Automatically, they started crying. That lets you know that he was never there. Or if he was there, they may have witnessed or seen some things that never set right with them. They may have treated their mother the wrong way, or they may have been that Papa was a Rolling Stone, and it set up something on the inside of them that as they got older, it made it hard for them to identify with men in their lives, or close that gap, or be able to give of themselves, because they saw so much negative, the negative aspect of that man as the father. But at the same time, they also build up a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness, and a lot of things on the inside. And because the father, even though he probably was there, he wasn't being the father or the man that in her eyes, she thought that he should be.
Wow.
So he was basically present, but not present.
But not present. There you go. And a lot of women to this day.
Wow.
You know, and as a therapist and a psychology, a lot of times they want to trace back your childhood. When you go to counseling, they trace back your childhood. Because a lot of things are why we act the way we act today can stem from what happened in your childhood.
Right.
And when they trace 9 out of 10, it's not so much the mother not being around, but when they find out that the father was not around, now you can start putting little bits and pieces together as to why you are the way that you are, why this man now in his 40s is acting this way, or why this woman in her 40s heading into 50s or whatever age is acting the way that she is acting, because the dad was never around, or like Kenneth said, he was present but not present.
Wow. And, you know, let me spin this a little bit too, since we're talking about some of the roadblocks that women cause in, you know, between the relationship between a father and a child. The question I want to ask you guys is, why are some of the reasons why men don't want to be involved in their child's life?
That's a good question. Reggie, you can go ahead and take this one.
I think a lot of it is, and it took a minute for me to understand this bit, because I didn't understand, because my dad was there. A lot of them have a hard time because when that child is born, it's a difference when you see this woman with that child in her stomach. Right now, there's not a lot going on. But once that child is born, you realize now I got a responsibility. A lot of men were not taught the responsibility. They didn't have the fathers in their lives. They didn't have positive role models. In the last couple of decades, the identity of a man is coming from TV. He's supposed to be a baller, a hustler.
Right.
He's supposed to be all this other type of stuff like that. So they mimic their environment. But me coming up, I mimicked my dad and my uncles and what I saw. So it was easy for me. But there's a fear factor that comes on because now you're like, I never had a father. So how am I supposed to be a father? So instead of them diving in and taking on the responsibility and then learning on the go, because even if we had fathers, we were still kind of learning on the fly because we really didn't know what it was. But a lot of that comes from fear and the unknown. And I hear a lot of men say, I just didn't want to make the mistake, so I left. Yeah. That's a horrible excuse because now this is your child. But a lot of that comes from because they didn't have the picture. They didn't have the foundation. They didn't have that blueprint. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. They didn't have the blueprint of what a father should be or a real man should be as it pertains to raising their child. So the easiest thing to always do, in psychology, you learn fight or flight. Instead of them fighting, they chose to flight.
And that's a sad truth because there are a lot of men out there that just don't want the responsibility. And the other side of that, though, Reggie, I want to say is that there's a lot of men that don't want the responsibility if they can't have the woman either.
That's true, too.
And to me, that's not being responsible. It's like, just saying that the only way I'm going to have a relationship with my child is if you and I together. So now you want to hold the child. You're being the tool, like the mother was being the tool, the mother that's keeping the kid away from you because of that. Now you're doing the same thing. So to me, that's a poor excuse to say that, well, if I can't, have her, then I don't want to be responsible for the child. Nowadays, you have so many kids that are without fathers, without role models, without examples. For me, when my dad worked a lot and there was times I felt like I wanted my dad to be there more and I felt like he should have been there more. But as I grew up, I understood why, he wasn't, he couldn't be at everything and every place at one time because he worked. He was doing what he had to do to build the dream, to get life started, to leave something behind for us. And so now what I did is I look to other role models. I look to other men, and I can say that I kind of mirror my dad, but I also look to every person that was able to deposit something in me to kind of, reflect on and become the man that I am right now. You get what I'm saying? But I still don't think it's fair that from a man's perspective or woman's perspective to say that, if I can't be in a relationship with you, then I'm going to keep you from seeing the kids. And then we take the other side of that where we want to get upset because they're dating somebody else and we don't want our kids to be around somebody else.
Exactly.
So now that's a whole nother level of and issue.
I would say too, I don't agree with either standpoint. From a woman's standpoint of pulling the child away from the father, or the father having their justifications on why they don't feel the need to be present, because for one, the child didn't ask to be here. Right. And I think at that point, you have to grow up and not be selfish. And, as parents, you have to be able to get to that place to where you're communicating on what's best for the child. You know what I'm saying? A child should never be in a place from my perspective to where they have to choose out, who they want to be with. We should be able to come to an agreement to where we're able to raise the child together, and bring them up, the right way, versus you being upset because we're not together, or I'm not going to have you with your son because you dating somebody I don't like, or you're not with me. Why don't we put the kid first just to make sure that they're getting everything that they need from both the father and the mother.
Exactly. I think that, it's so many different ways we can go with this. I remember working in the juvenile system, and when you start talking about to the kids about their past and asking them about their fathers, they got angry, automatically got angry because the father wasn't there. And the different stories that I heard, you sit back and you listen, it's very, very painful because now these kids are set up for a life of basically failure because they didn't have that balance and everything that they wanted. So then they started to act out. A lot of them acted out on anger. But I'm going to say this too, that one thing that I before my dad passed, I remember my dad passed and he had cancer, and it was like maybe a couple of months before he passed. And he was laying down, indirectly kind of laying down the law for me on how to carry on without him. And I remember sitting at the table, and my dad told me this. He said, "You know something, Reg?" And I remember the cancer was eating him up. And I remember my dad leaning over because he was in so much pain. He said, "I'm going to tell you this, Reg." He said, "Because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around." He said, "But one thing that I always want you to do is that no matter what, I want you to always take care of your kids." He said, "If you have 5, 10, 12, 20 kids," he said, "you better take care of every last one of them kids. Always be present in their life." And he told me, he said, "If I ever find out while I'm in my grave that you haven't taken care of them kids," he said, "I'm going to come back and hunt you." He said, "Because that's not what Smith men do. We take care of our kids." So even prior to him leaving and dying and passing, he was given an instruction. He was given that blueprint that long after I'm gone, you still have a responsibility to take care of. You carry on that name, have them carry on a name. You be that support, you be that strength and that fortitude for that child. Because if I ever find out that you didn't, me and you gonna have some issues. And I'm like, "All right, Dad, I got you." You know what I'm saying? But he passed that along. And as dads, we need to start passing things along to our children so they can be better members and productive in society and relationships as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I feel that that's something that's very, very vital to every father out there and every kid. What I want to say is that, while we're heading to close, I feel like I want to charge every man that's listening, to make sure that you're being an example. You're being involved in your kid's life. You're doing what you need to do to take care of them. And even if it's your stepchild, you still have a responsibility for that household and to that child, because it takes a village to raise kids. So if you're not accountable and responsible for that kid, then the streets are going to raise them, or somebody else is going to raise them, or you'll find yourself, well, I don't want that man around my kid. Well, you're not doing your job, so you can't be upset about it.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I know Jackie has a charge for the women that, are out here doing the same thing and using kids as pawn and tools, because, at the end of the day, it's not even about us. It's really about those children.
And that would be my charge to the women, is to don't be selfish. Always think of the child first, and, making sure that you are not withholding or preventing that child from developing that relationship with the other parent, because it's just as important as being a mom. It's a father is just as important with being present in that child's life.
And to piggyback on that, I don't think that you should have to force a person to be involved in their kid's life. If they're not going to be involved, it is not your responsibility to break your neck to try to get them to be involved or be around this kid's life. They should show some initiative on their own.
Exactly. And I'll say this too, for all the men that are listening that should be listening. If you don't do anything else with your child or children, make an impact in their lives. Not just being there, but make an impact in your life. Do something for your child as far as being in their life that they can take with them later on down the line as they grow, as they get older. Be impactful, be epic in their lives, so that when they see you, they know my dad was phenomenal. He may not have been this, but he did this and he made such an impact in my life. I can be a better person.
And there's a scripture that says a man that don't take care of his own is worse off than the infidel.
Infidel.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
No, it's not.
Well, I think this was another great topic. I think we kind of touched on a lot of things. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Cast, Castbox, Spotify, anywhere you could download podcasts, you could pretty much find us. Also, when you get time, check out our blogs on our website, whenwetalk.net. And anything else before we close? Anybody got anything else they want to add?
No, I'm good, man. I think this is very insightful.
Well, until next time, keep your head up.
Keep God first.
And keep it moving.